The Auckland Showdown, collision of philosophies. Under the cold lights of the Auckland court, a truth is emerging that is forcing Asian tennis and the WTA media rooms to reconsider what they once believed to be certain. On paper, this shouldn't be a controversial semi-final. On one side is Wang Xinyu, an icon of the Chinese training system, a four-time Grand Slam doubles champion, and an Olympic medalist. On the other side is Alexandra Eala, just 20 years old, who wasn't even considered a real threat at the WTA level just 2 seasons ago. But tennis is not a sport of titles, and it is certainly not a place where reputation is protected solely by the past. In the closed meeting rooms at the ASB Classic, the question is no longer who is stronger, but whether the unthinkable is happening too fast. A player raised in a training system worth hundreds of millions of dollars, accustomed to finishing points at the net, now faces a different reality. On the singles court, there is no one standing next to you to share the fire. No partner to cover the backhand. No brief tactical breaks of doubles. Only wide open space, long rallies, and the pressure to finish every point alone. On the other side, Alexandra Eala enters this match not with an aura of fame, but with something more dangerous, momentum. Something every coach fears, but no one can measure with statistics. She doesn't play like a young apprentice. She plays like someone with nothing to lose, and that is exactly when big systems begin to crack. What has caught the attention of analysts in the US is not rankings or nationality. It's the bigger question. Why do the world's top doubles champions consistently struggle when stepping onto the singles court? And if this continues, are we completely misjudging the concept of class in modern tennis? This is not just a WTA 250 semifinal. It is a test of a training philosophy, a collision between experience and intensity, between control and chaos. And somewhere in this match, there may be a moment where both China and the rest of Asia will have to wonder, has the next generation arrived sooner than we thought? If you want to follow the stories behind the numbers, the matches where highlights don't tell the whole story, consider subscribing to Pro Tennis 360, where tennis is seen from a perspective that mainstream media often misses. The system built a champion, but did it build a singles killer? Before this semifinal ever reached a scoreboard in Auckland, it had already been decided in training centers, policy meetings, and development philosophies that span more than a decade. To understand why this matchup feels so unsettling to insiders, you have to start with Wang Xinyu, not as a player, but as a product of one of the most disciplined sports systems in the world. Wang didn't rise through chaos. She rose through structure. From her early teens, she was shaped for efficiency, clean technique, disciplined net play, and above all, doubles excellence. In that environment, success is measured in medals, coordination, and repeatable outcomes. And by those standards, Wang delivered 4 Grand Slam doubles titles, an Olympic silver medal, global respect as one of the smartest net players of her generation. But singles tennis doesn't reward efficiency the same way. In singles, there is no margin for shared responsibility. Every missed forehand is yours alone. Every dip in stamina is exposed. Every mental crack echoes louder because there's no partner to absorb the pressure. And this is where the conversation around Wang quietly shifts, especially among coaches who've watched her closely. Statistically, she has been close many times. Semifinals, late round appearances, matches where, on paper, she should have closed the door. Yet the door stayed open, not because of talent gaps, but because singles tennis demands something the system never prioritized: prolonged suffering, long rallies, lateral punishment, mental isolation. Now contrast that with Alexandra Eala. Eala didn't come from a machine built to produce medals. Her path was fragmented, international, and, at times, uncertain, which forced her to become adaptable, to win ugly, to stay in points longer than comfortable, to develop footwork and conditioning not as bonuses, but as survival tools. That difference matters more than rankings suggest. Because when these two step onto a singles court, the question isn't who has the better resume. It's who has been trained to endure being alone in chaos. One player is used to controlling space at the net. The other is used to defending every inch of baseline for hours if needed. And here's the part most previews skip. This isn't about underestimating Wang. It's about asking whether her greatest strengths were built for a format that no longer applies. In doubles, her instincts are lethal. In singles, those same instincts can pull her forward at the wrong moment, expose movement patterns, and drain energy faster than expected. That's why this match feels heavier than a typical semifinal. It's not just player versus player. It's philosophy versus reality. And once the rally stretch, there's no system left to lean on. Only habits, conditioning, and nerve. And that's where things start to get uncomfortable. When momentum becomes a weapon no stat can measure. If systems build structure, momentum builds belief. And belief is the most volatile force in singles tennis. This is where Alexandra Eala quietly separates herself from expectations. Not through raw power, not through intimidating size, but through a rhythm that keeps accelerating while opponents are still trying to stabilize. Momentum is not just about winning matches. It's about how those matches are won. Eala's recent run hasn't been built on quick collapses or lucky breaks. It's been forged in long exchanges, extended baseline wars, and moments where her opponents expected her level to dip, and it never did. That consistency under physical stress is what alarms coaches more than any highlight reel winner. For a 20-year-old, her match management looks unusually mature. She doesn't rush points. She doesn't panic when rallies stretch past 10 shots. Instead, she leans into them, forcing opponents to answer the same question repeatedly. How long can you stay here with me? Against veterans, that question often becomes uncomfortable faster than expected. Contrast that with Wang Xinyu, whose career momentum has historically arrived in bursts rather than waves. In doubles, that's enough. Points are shorter. Roles are defined. Energy expenditure is shared. But in singles, momentum isn't borrowed. It's self-generated and constantly defended. What worries analysts isn't Wang's ability to strike winners. It's the moments between them, the neutral rallies, the transitional points where nothing flashy happens, but legs slowly fill with fatigue. That's where momentum quietly changes hands. And that's exactly where Eala thrives. There's also the psychological layer few broadcasts linger on. When a younger player keeps matching or exceeding the pace, doubt creeps in. Doubt leads to pressing. Pressing leads to lower margin shots. And suddenly, the player with more experience is taking bigger risks, not because it's smart, but because standing still feels worse. Momentum feeds on that discomfort. By the second set of most Eala matches, opponents aren't just playing her. They're negotiating with their own impatience. Every extra ball feels like an insult. Every retrieved shot feels like a reminder that this match isn't unfolding according to plan. This is why rankings lag behind reality. Momentum doesn't show up in pre-match graphics. But once it takes hold, it dictates tempo, shot selection, and emotional control. And right now, Eala carries it like a second racket. That doesn't guarantee victory. But it guarantees one thing. This match will not be decided quickly. And the longer it lasts, the more dangerous momentum becomes. The physical truth of singles tennis, no one likes to admit. At the professional level, every player is fit. That's the polite lie tennis likes to tell. The uncomfortable truth is that singles fitness isn't about how strong you are when fresh. It's about how functional you remain when exhausted. And this is where the gap between formats becomes impossible to ignore. Singles tennis is a test of repeated movement under stress. Lateral sprints, sudden stops, direction changes that punish hips and knees long before arms get tired. It's not glamorous. It doesn't make highlight reels. But it decides matches more often than aces or winners. Eala's game is built around this reality. Her court coverage isn't flashy, but it's relentless. She resets points that should be over. She tracks balls that force opponents to hit one more shot than planned. Over time, that one more becomes decisive. Wang's physical profile tells a different story. Taller players often dominate with reach and serve placement, especially in doubles. But in singles, height can become a tax. Lower recovery speed, higher energy cost on wide balls. more stress on lateral movement. None of these are flaws until rallies get long. And rallies will get long here. Hard courts reward patience. They don't absorb pace like clay, but they don't end points instantly either. That middle ground exposes conditioning gaps faster than either extreme surface. Every extended exchange becomes a small endurance exam, graded relentlessly. This is where match planning matters. Eala doesn't need to overpower. She needs to redirect, to stretch, to make the court feel wider than it is. When she does, opponents begin managing their bodies instead of their tactics. That's when decision-making suffers. Fatigue isn't just physical, it's cognitive. Shot selection narrows. Safe targets look smaller. And suddenly, a player known for control starts forcing outcomes too early. Not because they want to, because they feel they have to. Observers sometimes mistake this for choking. It's not. It's physiology meeting pressure. Eala's conditioning gives her permission to wait, to let points breathe, to trust that the wear and tear is accumulating on the other side. That patience is rare in young players. It's even rarer to see it paired with confidence. The longer this match extends beyond the first hour, the less it resembles a technical contest, and the more it becomes a physical negotiation. Who can still change direction cleanly? Who can still recover between points? Who can still think clearly when lungs are burning? Singles tennis answers those questions brutally. And once the body starts dictating choices, reputation stops mattering. Experience versus pressure, and why the scoreline can lie. On paper, experience should tilt this matchup decisively. Big stages, medal ceremonies, Grand Slam finals. These are environments where nerves are supposed to vanish with repetition. But singles tennis has a way of redefining pressure, not as spectacle, but as isolation. Experience helps when things go according to script. Pressure shows up when they don't. Wang has spent years mastering moments with shared responsibility. Doubles teaches communication, positioning, trust. It also diffuses accountability. In singles, every error echoes louder because there's no one to glance at across the net. No reset through partnership, just silence and self-assessment. That solitude is where pressure mutates. Eala enters this match with a different psychological contract. Expectations trail behind her, not in front. Every game won feels like validation. Every lost point feels recoverable. That freedom changes how pressure is processed. She isn't defending a legacy. She's constructing one. And that matters late in sets. Closed scorelines amplify internal dialogue. Experienced players often hear the weight of history. Missed chances, previous semifinals, matches that slipped away. Younger players hear something else, opportunity. That difference shapes risk tolerance. When pressure peaks, Wang's instincts may push her toward control, finishing points early, moving forward, shortening rallies. Against most opponents, that's logical. Against someone committed to dragging the match into deeper waters, it becomes hazardous. Eala, meanwhile, benefits from clarity. Her mission is simple. Stay present, stay physical, stay patient. She doesn't need spectacular tennis. She needs consistent tennis. And consistency under pressure is its own form of dominance. This is why scorelines can mislead. A tight set doesn't mean equal control. A few close games can hide who's actually dictating emotional momentum. Often, the player forcing longer exchanges is winning an invisible battle even when the scoreboard disagrees. If this match reaches a deciding stretch, late second set or beyond, experience may not be the advantage many assume. Pressure doesn't care about medals. It responds to context. And right now, context favors the player with less to lose and more stamina to spend. That's what makes this semi-final dangerous to predict. Not because of talent gaps, but because pressure rarely behaves the way history suggests it should. And once pressure flips sides, it rarely flips back. The left-handed variable that quietly rewrites match dynamics. There's one detail that keeps resurfacing in private scouting notes, yet rarely gets full airtime on mainstream previews: the left-handed factor. In isolation, handedness sounds trivial. At this level, it isn't. It changes geometry, timing, and comfort zones, especially in singles. This is where Alexandra Eala introduces a problem that doesn't announce itself immediately. Her lefty serve doesn't need to be overpowering. Its value lies in placement and spin, pulling the return wide, opening the court by inches that quickly become feet. Against right-handers, those patterns force constant micro-adjustments, small steps that quietly drain energy and confidence. In doubles, players are conditioned to expect this. Formations account for it. Partners cover angles. In singles, there is no such buffer. Every awkward return becomes a positional disadvantage, carried into the next shot. This matters because Wang's preferred patterns are built on early control. She wants to establish authority quickly, dictate at the net, shorten exchanges, and finish points decisively. The left-handed serve disrupts that script. It pushes her out of ideal positioning before the rally even begins. What follows is often subtle. A forehand struck slightly off balance. A net approach taken half a step late. A volley contacted a fraction lower than planned. None of these look dramatic on replay. But over time, they compound. Eala's follow-up patterns amplify this effect. She doesn't rush the kill. She redirects, resets, and waits for the opening that feels inevitable rather than forced. For opponents, this creates a sense of chasing control rather than holding it. The match begins to feel reactive instead of assertive. Left-handed matchups also mess with muscle memory. Players train thousands of hours against right-handers. Their default responses are calibrated for that spin direction. When those instincts fail, hesitation creeps in. And hesitation at this speed is costly. This isn't about trickery. It's about angles. About forcing decisions under discomfort. About making an experienced player question shots that normally feel automatic. As rallies stack up, the lefty advantage stops being a novelty and becomes a structural problem. Adjustments are possible, but they take time. And time is exactly what momentum-driven players don't give away easily. By the time the opponent fully recalibrates, the match may already be slipping into unfamiliar territory. When the match stops being about tennis, there is a point in matches like this where technique fades into the background and something heavier takes over. The crowd still sees forehands and backhands, but inside the court, the players are negotiating something else entirely: identity. This is where the semifinal stops being about tactics and becomes about what each player represents to themselves, to their system, to the expectations following them onto the court. For Wang Xinyu, this stage carries an unspoken burden. Every deep run in singles reopens the same question she's faced for years. Why hasn't this translated the way it should? That question doesn't need to be spoken to be felt. It shows up in the pauses between points, in the extra glance toward the baseline, in the subtle hesitation before committing forward. This is the pressure of legitimacy. Doubles greatness is unquestioned. Singles legitimacy, however, remains unfinished business. And unfinished business has a way of resurfacing at the worst possible moments. On the other side, Alexandra Eala is navigating a different psychological terrain. She isn't defending a resume, she's building one. That distinction matters more than fans realize. It changes how mistakes are processed. A missed opportunity isn't a failure, it's data. A lost game isn't a collapse, it's an adjustment point. This asymmetry reshapes the emotional economy of the match. One player feels time tightening, the other feels it expanding. As rallies extend and the scoreline tightens, the emotional cost of each decision grows unevenly. Wang's errors feel heavier because they reopen old narratives. Eala's errors dissipate faster because her story is still unfolding forward. That difference affects risk. Under pressure, players either simplify or force. Simplification favors consistency and stamina. Forcing demands precision under stress. One of these ages better over 2+ hours. This is why neutral observers often sense a shift before it appears on the scoreboard. The tempo doesn't necessarily change, the weight of points does. Some points start to feel like statements rather than exchanges. When that happens, the player more comfortable with ambiguity gains control. Singles tennis is cruel that way. It rewards those who can exist in uncertainty longer than their opponent. At this stage, the match isn't being won shot by shot. It's being won decision, by who trusts their process when the margin for error feels microscopic. And that's when reputations become less relevant than tolerance. The moment the system can't step in anymore. Systems are powerful until they aren't. They provide structure, resources, repetition, and certainty. But no system can step onto the court in the final moments of a tight semifinal. At some point, the player stands alone, stripped of philosophy, training history, and expectation. That moment is coming here. As the match deepens, adjustments become smaller and more personal. There are no sweeping tactical changes left, only micro decisions. Serve placement by inches, rally selection by patience, emotional regulation by breath. This is where individuality eclipses infrastructure. Wang's system has given her weapons, net instincts, court awareness, competitive intelligence. But in extended singles exchanges, those weapons require ideal conditions to function optimally. When fatigue creeps in, timing slips. When timing slips, confidence wavers. Eala's preparation has been less about optimization and more about resilience. Her game doesn't require perfect conditions. It survives imperfect ones. That makes it adaptable late, when matches become messy. Observers often misinterpret this phase as chaos. It isn't. It's simplification. Tennis reduces itself to essentials: movement, balance, belief. Fancy patterns disappear. Only repeatable actions remain. This is where matches are quietly decided. When systems can no longer intervene, habits take over. Players revert to what they trust under stress. For Wang, that trust often lies in shortening points. For Eala, it lies in extending them. One choice accelerates resolution. The other delays it. Delaying resolution doesn't mean passivity. It means control through endurance. It means allowing pressure to ferment on the other side of the net. And fermentation in competitive environments is dangerous. When the result means more than a final. When the final points arrive, the scoreboard will offer a simple answer. One name advances. One stops here. But the real outcome of this match will travel far beyond Auckland. If Alexandra Eala prevails, it won't just be a semi-final win. It will be a signal that modern singles tennis is drifting away from rigid specialization and toward adaptability, endurance, and psychological elasticity. It will challenge assumptions about development paths, about which systems produce singles-ready athletes, and about how early momentum can accelerate belief. If Wang Xinyu withstands the pressure and closes, the victory will carry its own weight. It will represent reclamation, proof that experience, recalibration, and adjustment can overcome stylistic discomfort. It would mark a turning point, not just a win. Either way, this match exposes something the surface narratives often miss. Tennis is no longer just about who hits harder or who's ranked higher. It's about who manages uncertainty better when the structure falls away. That's why this semi-final matters. Not because of nationality, not because of rankings, but because it forces a deeper conversation about where the sport is headed and who it rewards. Moments like this don't always announce themselves as historic. They look ordinary until hindsight sharpens them. But insiders know. They watch body language. They listen to silence between points. They recognize inflection points when they happen. This match feels like one of those moments. If you want more breakdowns that go beyond highlights, stories that explain why matches unfold the way they do, not just what happened, consider subscribing to Pro Tennis 360. It's where tennis is analyzed through context, pressure, and the details that decide outcomes long before the final handshake. Because in tennis, the truth is rarely just on the scoreboard.